Fantasia was a 1940 animated music anthology produced by Walt Disney. To put it simply, it's basically a musical using classical music with hand-drawn animation matching the sounds of the music. When it released, this was considered a masterpiece, one of the best pieces of art ever made. And then around 50 years later, a couple of dudes at Infogrames decided to make a game about this work of art. And how did that turn out? They had to destroy every unsold copy ever made.
Good.
So what happened? Well, believe it or not, they didn't destroy the games because it was bad, but because Roy E. Disney made a promise to his uncle, Walt Disney, that any Fantasia adaptations would not be made. And giving out the licensing to Infogrames to make this game was made in error, so he told the devs to go screw themselves. However, this happened after the game was made, so people were still able to buy it in the small time frame they had. Unfortunately though, during the development cycle of this game, the devs were pressured to rush this game for the holidays, as they wanted this to be the next big game to release in the next season, after Sonic the Hedgehog. And I mean, while that's a good idea, because this is Mickey Mouse, you shouldn't rush your devs. And to the surprise of absolutely no one, the game was rushed out, not having enough time to finish up certain parts of the game, but it was still released for the holidays. Though even though this game had a rush job, could this game still be good? Is Fantasia the worst platformer ever made? Let's find out. When you start the game, you get hit with a short cutscene of Mickey sleeping. While he's sleeping, a bunch of notes fly away, and then Mickey's ghost, or whatever this is, also flies away with them. To summarize poorly, the story is basically Mickey Mouse loses these notes that his master needs while he's asleep. They fly away and escape. He has to go into the dream world and get them back. And just for those that aren't aware, this is not the story of the Mickey Mouse animated part in Fantasia. That story is completely different. In the animation, Mickey pretty much doesn't want to do any more chores, so he becomes a wizard by putting the wizard hat on and then makes a broom come alive to do his chores for him. This of course causes a lot of issues to happen, but that's not the story of this game. The game story is completely different. The only thing that is similar between these two games are the areas that this game takes place in. You will be visiting a lot of areas and seeing a lot of enemies that are based off Fantasia, the animation. But just like the animation, this game also uses classical music. And they remade the classical music that was used in the animation for the Genesis to be able to fit on the cartridge. Some of it can sound pretty good. Some of it can sound horrible. After getting that quick cutscene, we get shown the title screen, which looks pretty boring, but then after that we get this. This is basically an options menu, but it looks like a debug screen. The Mickey Mouse sprite here is alright, but man, this just kind of looks cheap. Let's go over the settings quickly. Dreams are how many lives Mickey has, and continues are how many times you can get a game over. The sound option here, if you set it to 0, it plays the music for the level, but you can also change it to always play the song of your liking, which is actually a positive. That's a really cool feature. You can also change the controls here if you want, but I just kept them as default. You also, of course, have your difficulty setting, which I will go over later. We push start to get into the game, and we're in level 1. Honestly, I will give the game this. It really doesn't look that bad. Dare I say even looks good. Everything is animated very well, and it all looks very lively. However,
this is where the positives end.
There's maybe only one small positive later, but that's about it. And I want you to see this. The first thing I do in this game is I jump down and immediately die. Could you see what happened? 5 different negatives about the game just happened all at once. Let's go over them. Number 1, jumping as Mickey is horrible. When you push the jump button, he legit takes 1 second from going to an animation to then finally jumping. While this is animated pretty well, it makes the game feel unresponsive. In every good platformer ever made, this is pretty much always instant, unless the platformer was made to be more realistic or something, but this is not realistic. It just feels very weird to have that delay. You do get used to it, maybe you don't, but it's still kind of horrible. Number 2, there are no iframes after getting hit. Well, that's not true. There is, but it's about half a second long. But like I was saying, after half a second, you can be hit again. So if you jump into an enemy and you get stuck inside him, you get hit multiple times. And there are enemies that are just way bigger later on, and if you walk through them, it can take even more hits out of you. This system is terrible, and it makes you die almost immediately sometimes. Number 3, which I think is the biggest one of all. This is the biggest issue with this game. This mechanic actually made me upset the entire time I was playing it because of how bad it was. In this game, you can actually jump off enemies, but take a guess how. While jumping, you have to hold down the D-pad to jump off of enemies. What? If you're not holding down, you fall through them. This is horrible. I cannot explain how bad this system is. And if you fall into an enemy because you forgot to push down, which will happen a lot by the way, you're going to take 2 to 3 hits because you fall into them and you need to get out, which takes time. And due to having low iframes, you're going to get hit more than once. You cannot expect a player to remember to push down on the D-pad when we're going to be jumping thousands of times in the game onto the enemies when there have already been games in the past where you haven't had to do this. But guess what? That's only the 3rd issue. We still have 2 more. Number 4. Because you have to hold down to jump, you're going to be holding down a lot. But if you're holding down on the ground, you can't jump at all. I am actively trying to jump here.
Why can't I jump?
Because you have to hold down to jump on enemies, you're going to be holding down a lot. And because you're going to be holding down a lot, you might be holding it while you're on the ground, which might accidentally make you not jump when you need to, which again is annoying. Issue number 5. We can finally talk about the difficulty setting at the start. So this is one of those games where the difficulty setting isn't actually truly what it says it is. The game gives us easy, normal, and hard. But the real difficulty settings they actually mean are normal, hard, and die. In this game, you start with 4 hearts. These are how many hits you can take. On easy, you take 1 hit, and the enemies normally die in 1 hit. On normal, you take 2 hits of damage most of the time, and enemies die in 2 hits most of the time. And on hard, when you get hit, you take 3 points of damage, and most of the time, enemies will die in 3 hits. You can collect these stars to increase the amount of hits you can take. I also think some of the platforming stuff and the collectibles are moved around a little bit, depending on what difficulty you play on, but I can't really confirm that.
I'm sorry.
However, I'm mostly focusing on the damage here. Remember how I was saying if you miss jumping on an enemy, you get put into them and you take at least 2 hits before you're able to get out of them? Well, that was on easy. Again, you only start with 4 hearts, no matter the difficulty. So if you play on normal and you get stuck in an enemy, you take up to 4 hits or more of damage and instantly died. You are screwed immediately. And on hard, you take 3 points of damage every time you get hit. I don't even think you can beat this on hard. I don't think it's possible. I cannot believe that a 3-second clip of me jumping into an enemy showed off 5 different issues with the game. That is insane. For this playthrough, I'm going to be playing on easy because in my opinion, which I deem as fact,
screw you.
This actually makes the game kind of playable. It can be hard at times, but it's not too crazy. I truly feel like this is the real normal mode and the way you should be playing the game. But after that long list of issues, back to level 1. The first part here is pretty simple. It's just a hallway. Level 1 is just a retelling of the Mickey section of Fantasia the animation, where the castle floods due to these mops Mickey brings to life, filling a well with too much water. The level design here is kind of it's just a straight hallway that spams you with enemies. There is a high path and low path, but always just take the high path because it lets you avoid everyone. And anyone that you can't avoid, you can just shoot. But oh right, let me explain the magic. Mickey can shoot magic, which is both useful and useless. Let me explain. Mickey can shoot out magic with one of the buttons. This magic costs 1 magic point. Once you run out of magic points, you can't use them anymore. You can use this to cast a spell to shoot enemies and dispatch them. They typically will die on 1 hit on this difficulty, though some don't. To refill your magic points, you need to touch one of these flying books.
Why won't it work?
And this is where the issue comes in. There are a lot of parts in this game where you're required to use magic to get around enemies by dispatching them because there might be no other way to get around them. So if you run out of magic and you come to a point in a game where you're stuck and you can't go forward unless you need to dispatch an enemy, you are screwed because you have to find a book, which there might not be any of. In my opinion, it's best to just store and hold as many magic points as you can for when you really need it. I do not think it is worth it to use magic whenever you feel like, because as I said, most enemies on this difficulty will just die in one shot. But there are enemies later on that will require 3 magic shots, and you need to do it to get past them to continue the level. So you might not have enough, so it's best to just hold on to them for as long as you can. There are also 2 different types of magic you can cast, a small one and a large one. The small one, like I said, just deals 1 hit of damage, which I use most of the time. The big one supposedly deals 3 hits of damage. But I swear I've used this against enemies that die in 3 hits and nothing happens. It feels like it just deals the same amount of damage as the small one. And I never really bothered using it anyway because the big one costs 3 magic points to use, so it's not really worth it. But that's pretty much the magic system. Back to level 1. My only real complaint with this part of the level here, other than it being basic like I said before, is that the platforms you jump onto blend in with the background sometimes. It's hard to tell what the difference is. But like I said, it's a pretty simple hallway. Just get to the end and then you can go outside, and this is still part of level 1, just a different segment. Visually, again, it looks nice. We walk up ahead and see these platforms. Now what the hell is this? I don't think I've seen a platformer where the speed of it just looks so jittery and random. There are a lot of platforms in this game like this, and it's very annoying. It doesn't really seem finished, which you'll be hearing a lot from me throughout this game. If you fall into the water, you don't immediately die, thank God, you just take damage, which is fair I guess, I'll give the game that. It's so much better that you just take a point of damage instead of instantly dying. However, if you fall into a whirlpool on this level, you fall into the water, which sends you into a swimming level. Controlling Mickey here is awful. You hold a button to go up and let go to go down. Overall, it just feels very weird to control. I also can't find my way out of here. I die, and then I never come back here again. I then proceed in the level by walking up to this alligator and it sends me flying. Cool mechanic, but there's an alligator here that always just seems to throw you into the water. I'm not sure how to avoid this. I did sometimes, but it felt really random. I then make it to this island and wait, what? Going into the middle of the island teleports you back in the level. Why? We get back to the island but avoid the middle part that teleported us, but I want to stress something here. We are playing on easy, which I consider normal difficulty. And I have died at least 20 times up to this point. This is only 60% of the way through level 1. And I have died at least 20 times up to this point. If you couldn't tell by now, this game is very difficult. But anyway, let's continue. We get to the end and we get put into another hallway which looks pretty much like the first one. Same idea as well here, you just take the high ground. But we find this door on the bottom. This door is maybe one of the last positives I will give this game, unless I randomly remember some. It is a bonus room, to put it simply. Touch the enemies, you get immediately kicked out. But if you avoid them, you can grab health and magic here to help you. This is a really good mechanic because you get a lot of lives and you get a lot of magic points here. It's a good way to restock. This is a good mechanic. I like this. Anyway, back into the hallway again and we get to the end and we beat the level. Wait a minute, why is he walking the other way? It took me 47 minutes to beat this level and it wants me to do it again. So why did this happen? Most people playing this game as a kid would probably get confused, frustrated, and just stop playing here. Well, let's look at the manual. The difficulty actually affects something else. It affects how you beat the level. There are music notes around the level you can collect that give you 20,000 points. To beat an easy level, you need to get a certain amount of points. The notes help a ton, but they aren't required. Though I also realized, if you play on the harder difficulty, you get more points for collecting some of the collectibles. But that's not really a good payoff for how insanely impossible the game becomes if you raise the difficulty. I'm gonna be honest, I hate this. Why make a person replay a level because he didn't collect enough stuff? Let the player play the game how they want to. Forcing the player to replay an already hard level is gonna make them quit, like it did for me. I look up a level select password, and there is none. Well, it looks like I'm gonna have to do this the old-fashioned way and actually play the game using save states, because this would take me several more hours to do if I didn't. Anyway, with enough points at hand, we beat level 1. Level 2, and that's not possible to dodge! This level is based off the animated dinosaur segment in the Fantasia animation. Visually, it looks alright, well maybe just kind of okay. Not as good as the first level for me, it's kind of a down a bit, but everything just kind of looks gross and muddy. This level is pretty much the same as the last one. It's just just a straight line to the end. Though there are new enemies here to match the theme of the level. Dinosaurs and these weird plant things. I personally feel like you can feel like the quality of the game is slowly degrading here though. Some of the sprites here just don't have animation. It's just the sprite moving while being a still image like this dinosaur leg. You can really see where the rushing comes into play here. I also find out here you can touch fairies to have them warp you to other areas. The fairies I find mostly seem worth it most of the time, that the areas you get ported to have a lot of points for you to get, so I really recommend these. If you fall into a pit, you stand on it and take damage, and while I appreciate it not one-shotting you, it still kind of just looks odd. Later on, I find another fairy that teleports me to a desert with a lot of points for me to get. The desert has some really weird issues that happen a lot later where stuff just randomly pops in, like these platforms. They just pop in. There's also another fairy warp with this area with all these lights, and they're a pain in the ass. They damage you and they just move so fast it's impossible to dodge them. You move way slower than they do. But anyway, after we get out of that, that's pretty much the entire level. Other than it being hard as hell like the other levels, it was pretty basic. Level 3, are you kidding me? Why did the cloud do that? It just sent me down to my death. Why? This level again is also based off the Fantasia animation segment where there's a bunch of nature and fairies flying around. Very beautiful stuff. Though the gameplay of this level is not beautiful, though the art style of this level is a bit better than the last one. However, this level is horrible. Have you ever heard of the game Only Up? Or maybe even Jump King? Well, the goal of those games is to get to the top and you win. But if you miss a jump, you fall down. You fall all the way down, as in you lose many minutes of progress. And it's the same goddamn thing here. If you fall here, you better start praying. The clouds here are just so random. Sometimes they disappear randomly, and sometimes they just drop down suddenly. I honestly can't tell if this was intentional or just a bug left in because the game was rushed. This level has you jumping from platform to reach the top. You can also jump into these bubbles to have you fly up, which is useful, but also annoying because you're way bigger as a bubble, and the enemies here that try and shoot you are going to shoot you most likely because of how big you are. Getting to the top is a struggle, not only with the disappearing clouds, but the enemy placement is just so bad. Entire platforms will have enemies covering the whole thing, and these white petals will be flying down directly into your path, with giving you no time to avoid them. It's insane the amount of exact timing you need here. You need to be perfect.
About as almost as perfect as you.
I make it up most of the way and find a fairy that teleports me to a sky, which in my opinion is the worst section of the game. You need to drop down here, but they put a million enemies everywhere. You're gonna get hit 20 times before you reach the bottom. What is the intention here? If you collect a music note in a level, it actually does make you invincible for a bit, and when you touch an enemy, they die. But it only lasts for a short while, not long enough to not get hit here. After many attempts, I finally am able to do it and can continue the climb. On my way up, I find another fairy and get warped again to another section based off the Fantasia animation. If you couldn't tell by now, most of the areas that the fairy transports you to are always based off the Fantasia animation. You are again going up here, but falling down isn't really run ending. You're going to be fighting with more precise jumps here, as you have to really grab onto the edges of these platforms here to jump up sometimes. This level has these massive hippos, which are terrible. They have a lot of health, and if you run into them, that's like 3 hits off your health because of how big they are. I finally climb my way all the way to the top, and this level is complete. This level has a lot of collectibles in it, so luckily I don't need to do it again. Now we're on to the last level. Yes, there are only 4 levels. I actually found the last level to be a lot easier than the previous 2 levels. What? This again is based off the Fantasia animation section of the Underworld. However, when playing this, you start to notice something. Firstly, what is that? I noticed something about this game. The further you get into the game, the more unfinished it feels. Level 1 only had the rickety platforms and bad swimming controls, that's really it. Level 2 had some decently drawn sprites, but some of them were just still images moving around, and it also had a few platforms disappearing and reappearing. Level 3 had platforms flying around wherever they liked and disappearing whenever they liked. It honestly felt like one of the more jank levels around. Level 4 is just full of everything. Unfinished sprites, unfinished animations, and a billion platforms that just appear and disappear at random.
But hey, at least the backdrop kind of looks cool here, I guess.
This is pretty much the same as level 1 and level 2 though, it's just a straight line to the end. This level doesn't really have anything new in it, it's pretty much full of stuff you've already seen, just with different enemies that pretty much do the same thing as the other ones. The ending here is kind of confusing as you see this fairy and you try to touch it but nothing happens. Turns out this is a boss rush, or well, enemy rush. You just have to keep defeating fighting these waves of enemies, and then once you're done, you touch the fairy, and that's it. The game is done. Mickey shakes the musician's hand after returning the music notes, and that's it? This is another one of those games that just makes me feel kinda bad. The art style in this game isn't actually really terrible, just not finished. Same with a lot of mechanics to the game itself. I really feel like if the devs weren't rushed, this would have been a good game.
It really does just feel like if they had a few finishing touches put on this game, it could have been a decent buy, but it's not.
But now it begs the question, is Fantasia the worst platformer ever made?
I mean, it's not really great, but let me recommend you something else. Magical Mirror starring Mickey Mouse, as this is the scariest game I have ever played.